So this is a lot on my mind right now. The reality is there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to determine both like the things that need to get done. Yeah, it's a priority, but it's also like realizing that it's a bandwidth issue as well. Hopefully as some of these projects move forward and,
Hey guys, it's Mandy with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
We're live now. Hello, hello. Hi, Jacob. It's so good to have you on today. And hello, everybody else. Addie, I see you're chiming in from Puerto Rico. Thank you so much. And Becky, it's good to see you from snowy Montana. I'm actually in Wyoming right now where it was -20. And so I'm missing Thailand weather, Jacob, for sure. But please let us know where you chime in today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We'd love to chat. I'm really excited to share or hear what Jacob's got going on and the transition and the excitement in the building industry, especially for hemp. And so, Jacob, before I rattle on too much, I feel like an hour always goes so fast. And so I'd love to hear from you. For those that don't know who you are, what are you working on and how did you get into this industry?
Okay. I will. I'm going to go a little bit off on this one. So, how did I get into the industry? So, I was actually working in the automotive industry. I come with a material science engineering background, and so I was helping to manufacture plastic parts in a couple different manufacturing environments. The last one being in automotive, making car parts, and was like, what am I doing with my life? I am in an industry that I really have some major issues with. This is a career path that could envelop my entire future. And I was like, this is not what I want to do or what I want to be. So I really started trying to find something good I could do for the world that I could just be like, when I go to bed at night, I could be happy that I was trying this. Did some digging, eventually found hempcrete and was like, well, I'm a material scientist and here's something that needs a lot of material science work to develop. This is perfect. And put in like a 2.5-month notice for my job because I didn't have anything paying on the back end. And then started playing in my garage, just mixing batches, trying to do different processing to get different outputs instead of just following the traditional recipe, if you will. So
I didn't realize you had a background in automotive or material science in the automotive industry. It's exciting. It's exciting to see this transition into something that's better for our planet.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. My life is a endless tale of one thing that evolves into something else that evolves into something else. I was a musician. I played music. And then I decided I was tired of being poor. I went back to engineering. So it's all just kind of a development. Then started working for a CBD cosmetics company running operations just because of my automotive management background. Then went to the Idaho summit that Hempatecture threw. Met the people at the USHBA. 3-4 months later, I got on the certifications committee. No, it was the regional leaders committee. Sorry, really regional leaders committee, like I guess executive committee meeting would probably be the accurate way of putting it. And then 6 months later, I was on the board and becoming president of the USHBA. Last couple of years, been trying to drive the USHBA. We got to a point where I was doing well at the COO at Ology, and that was picking up, and USHBA was picking up, and we were getting really about the code time when we really needed to buckle down. Basically, people have said with about a year left to go for the deadline, they're like, yeah, you don't have time. You're not going to make it. And then, about 6 months, like I'm trying to figure out how to make it work. And finally I had to make a decision, either stick with ology or stick with the USHBA. And I quit my paying job and focused on the USHBA and was like, all right, we got to get these codes done. And made that my major focus. We were able to fundraise with the USHBF. So thankful for everyone that supported it. I can never forget Justin Berg and Brian Wilson. That's Environmental Living Industries. I think I got that right. And Grassroots Development and in North Dakota. They were huge donors, really made a big difference. And then, we got the codes submitted in like 4 months. We did what was supposed to take over a year. But we slammed it together. And then the USHBA started evolving. We went and I transitioned from the president to the executive director. We got a whole new board on, kind of kept developing the association and everything. And about 6 months ago, I branched off, had to go rethink jump into it. My father passed away. There was a lot of stuff going on in my life. And, really had to think about what was best for me and what was best for the industry, how I could be most effective. And really it kind of ended up being, instead of dealing with this association, which I put a lot of love and care into and met some amazing people and grew to be something that I hope will last for a very long time. I needed to focus on the science and kind of put away some distractions and really put my head down. And so that's really kind of what I'm trying to do with the Hemp Building Institute. Still working, getting the codes through, still building standards. We're, trying to do some international work. Right now we're advising on a project in Kenya. It's a lot. We got some newer things coming up. We got an event stuff that I actually need to talk to you about. We can talk about a little bit. It might connect with like your dream of the Hemp Road Show.
Yes. Okay.
There's a lot of things. It's
okay.
Good.
So I and many listeners may already know this, but can you talk to me about what's included in certification, like in getting code written or getting hempcrete approved? What's involved in that process?
Okay, so it's complicated, and the word certification is like one that we kind of really want to shy away from right now. Certification would mean there's a certifying body that is approving things.
Yeah.
Codes is different. So I'm gonna focus on codes, and then we can kind of dig back into it.
Yeah.
So building codes in the United States are fragmented. There is different jurisdictions. Some are statewide, some are city, some are county. All the jurisdictions have the power to set rules or not set rules, really, because you have many jurisdictions out there that have basically no codes at all. Like if you go into rural districts, that's usually the case. So there, above these decision makers is a model code. And this model code is what the International Residential Code is, controlled by the International Code Council. Historically speaking, what happened was you had three big areas of the country that were segmented that all had their different model codes, and then they merged together so that you have one national, basically, model code. It's called the International Code Council because there are some jurisdictions outside the United States that use these. Some countries basically follow our rules. So getting something put in for that, there's a process. Basically, you draft up language. It's very much like almost like dealing with law, very specific meaning for words. You have to define words that are undefined. You also have to use very purposeful language, like shall. Like you have to command things. You can't like recommend things or say, oh, you can do this. And that's actually very critical in writing it, and really kind of sets out things you can't put in there, because you can't be, I guess wishy-washy is a bad word. Basically, you just have to say what has to be, and these are the minimum requirements, basically.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if you saw Cameron's comment here, but Jake,
yeah.
because of your sacrifices, that's the reason we have IRC index for hempcrete. Looking forward to next level from Hemp Building Institute. Thank you, Cameron. I totally agree.
But yeah, so that's you write the document, and then you have to go to basically a committee hearing, and they review it, and then they make a recommendation. And that's what happened in April of last year.
Yeah.
Wow, last year was a long year. Yeah. So that's
how long does that process take? I know with like hemp feed, for example, getting a response has taken years sometimes. What's the typical process, for them to be able to move it through?
So it's a bit different. So when you talk about something like hemp feed, it's like, okay, when you deal with something with the IRC, it's a cycle, and they have determined dates, determined time periods where they're going to review everything every time, stuff like that. So you just have to fit yourself into the cycle. Stuff like that feed stuff is not in a cycle. It's kind of at their will. And that's why it can take forever. And there's really nothing. There's things you can do, but
kind of. Like once application's submitted, it's a waiting game, right? So it's
I don't know. You could get lawyers involved or something, but it would probably backfire and make them your enemies. And really, you want everyone to be your friend. That's how you cooperate with people.
Yes.
And that's what happened with the process with the document was, we brought in consultants that were already embedded in the code industry as the natural building people. They had the connections. They knew who to talk to. They knew who we had to run things like certain sections by. We sent to somebody that specialized in fire, and somebody that specialized in insulation, somebody that might have an issue with the weather barrier. And they knew, like, okay, you need to talk to this person, this person, this person, because if not, come the committee hearing, they could object and they could just screw everything.
You need them to know in advance. Yeah.
Exactly. So you come to your compromises, you make the plan solid before anyone even sees it or hears it. And then by the time that happens, it's actually coming from the automotive world. It's a very Japanese way of handling business. Like in Japanese meetings, traditionally, there's no discussion. And that's because all the discussion happened before the meeting. They came to terms. They already made the decision. And the meeting itself is just a technicality.
Yeah. Formality, right?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about some of the projects, understanding where Hemp Building Association and change of leadership, and that they really have got some goals. Where does Hemp Building Institute plan to, what are some of your focuses and some of the projects you're really targeting this year?
Gotcha. So this is a lot on my mind right now. The reality is there's a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to determine both like the things that need to get done. Yeah, it's a priority, but it's also like realizing that it's a bandwidth issue as well. Hopefully as some of these projects move forward and, we start progressing, there can be more collaboration and more distribution of work. Or if it gets to a funding position where we can bring on more people at the HBI, that will also definitely help. But right now it is trying to figure out what seems most impactful, what will be most influential in the eventuality of things. So we're still following up on the codes. I have a meeting with Ray at the USHBA to kind of talk about how we're going to coordinate between that. Mm-hmm. I'm getting a quote right now from the consultants to finish off what's called the commentary in the codes. Codes basically have 3 layers, like the base code, which is the rules that everyone can see. Then the next part is like a reason why, and that's on the base of the document. You'll see that if you look on the USHBA site at the draft document. Then there's another layer, which is called the commentary. Now, this is like a special section that not everyone goes through, but it's a section where you can go, this code is written like for, this code is written for wall segments only. But hempcrete has been known and successfully used both in floor and ceiling applications. Stuff like that. Stuff that we didn't have enough backing evidence, and we thought it would be too hard of an ask to get these industry professionals to agree to without more data and more information. But we can still comment on, and it's where we can say the recommendations, and we can say the can-dos. So that still needs to be developed. That's a project. The commercial codes, which is the International Building Code, I think we have a solid strategy there. That is the idea is to reference the residential code, basically. There's going to be some more testing requirements and things that are required for commercial buildings. Primarily, or one of the major ones, is the fire testing, and that's something we'll be working for through the year. Sadly, fire testing is expensive, $30,000 to $50,000, for a test, and so it's going to take at least $200,000 to $500,000 really to run a battery of tests to cover things that we need, probably. So it's kind of a big project, but we'll hopefully get there. I've heard there's been success in a project that used a mini test by Perennial Building, and so they have some stuff there. But it's a mini test that their inspectors said we will take the results of this, but would probably not fly in the actual building code. So they have very strict rules, E119 tests, stuff like this that we have to fulfill. And then and then the Kenya project. I'm starting to advise on some testing at a university that's kind of trying to run the tests in the IRC code, which is cool. They're trying to do the compression testing. Right now, I'm working with Amerishon, actually Cam. We just delivered some samples. I think it was last week. I drove up to Pennsylvania and drove them down myself just to make sure everything was smooth and secure, and delivered them to the testing lab. And it's following a test procedure that we built for ASTM. So if these tests come out properly and everything works great, not only will we have test results, but we'll also be proving out the practice that we developed in ASTM and be able to try to move that forward to ballot. So that's awesome. And then and there's an event thing. We're trying to work on some event ideas, and if you want to talk about that, I think we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to dive in. Of course, knowing what, and really, I think the event piece becomes so important because this is where we really draw in outside audience, right? We can bring in new people to the projects and new support. And so, talk to me about what you have in mind as far as events, and what do you hear industry needs, right? What are those needs around the event space?
So, and this is why this is probably more of a dialogue between the two of us, is you have a lot better feelers out in the industry than I do, and especially the way I'm positioning myself. And so you may be able to answer that more. What I see and what I think is something that I've heard echoed for years. So it's definitely not new. Is we need to be getting out into the spaces where people don't know about us. We need to get out into we need our fabrics in big giant events about fabrics, and we need building materials at the home building shows. We do have. It's important for us to network as a group, and I think we have some really good, solid foundation for those type of interactions. GHA is a good example. You have different events that are excellent examples. But really, to move things forward, we need to start bringing in new people, and we need to starting to be fully accepted as an option in the industries. I think that's
a tool. Right? We're a tool for existing industries to become more sustainable, more reliable, localizing supply chain. I totally agree with you. Instead of us being a standalone industry, by ourselves, we need to fit right in And be it the offsite modular building events and the largest concrete events. And yes.
Well, I'm reading some of Addie's comments here as well. She's talking about in Puerto Rico, Adelaide Nunez Vasquez. I think Vasquez. I think I said it the second time. Addie is amazing. She's trying really hard in Puerto Rico to push the industry forward there. Big fan. And yeah, as we start developing this, and this is actually a good point, like what we're talking about, what we're thinking is not necessarily like event, but more like a booth or an addition to existing things. And
Yes.
again, trying to get into these spaces that already exist. And conceptually speaking, that could be a way to bring in locals. That could be, if we could repeat ideas, basically come out with a good solid blueprint, and then we can iron it out and pitch it, if you will, to different events and see where we can get on. And then we could just move it around wherever we have the right people. Like,
Absolutely.
and basically have, okay, this is the concept, this is how it works. What of these things can you supply locally? What of these things do we need to bring in from outside? Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking at my calendar. There's a Canna Tech event scheduled the first week of March in Puerto Rico. I've got the link to it up on my website, Addie, on globalhempassociation.org under events, where you'll be able to see. I don't know much about the event or how cannabis focused it is compared to industrial hemp, or medical and rec compared to industrial hemp, but it may be a great place to look at what's going on there. Then there was another thing I was going to mention just now, and of course it slipped my brain, but Jake, however I can support in developing this, the road show or these opportunities, I would love to. This is something we've talked about both at the National Industrial Hemp Council event about the need for us. And I hear over and over again from people within the industry is this need to pull out of industry, especially for funding, right? If we're going to start moving this forward, reality of how small hemp still is, it's so important. Okay, I have a question then. Where do you see real opportunity in developing markets internationally, both for benefit of US farmers and US processors, as well as a way to maybe prove out the concept of some of these building materials because codes are different in, say, Puerto Rico compared to here, or the Caribbean compared to the US?
Okay, I'm gonna try to get all that. So the first thing is the exporting. Okay, so when we talk about the hemp industry, and there's a lot of pitch about things being very localized in markets, and ideally that's the situation, shipping costs, things like this. That's very true, and I still believe in that. But we also live in many global markets that you're not going to change the market. We're not going to convince them, oh no, you got another cereal factory closer to the hemp fields. They're going to have their cereal factory somewhere, and they're going to ship that out. So that's kind of where I see the exports making sense, is if we get local farmers, there are things like, car part manufacturers, because that's part of the discussions, many discussions now. It's the farmers around the car part manufacturing plant suddenly have work to do that feed into that thing that then is an export. That makes more sense than the raw goods. I know that's a lot of people talk about the issues just because a lot of this stuff, it just costs a lot to ship.
Man, what about the import, right? There's so many people that are still importing, say, from Europe, hurd. Where do you see that kind of leveling out? And do we see more production here that's meeting standards so that our hempcrete companies can use U.S. grown and processed hemp?
Okay, so it's a complicated thing. If we talk about like grain markets, I mean, Canada is beating us, and really we should have a better fight in that. Like there's not reasons there, except that they've been doing it longer, and they have standards, and they have that quality control. We just need to get our act together and then really start rolling it out and become cost competitive. I mean, they just have a head start on us. When you talk about things like hurd, especially coming from Europe, you're right, there's quality standards there, and we need to establish those in this country. We're trying to slowly get there with ASTM tests. Like we have an ASTM test that is in development that hopefully will go to ballot soon. That the data, I think, is in the interlaboratory services in ASTM, which is basically a sieve analysis to get size and dust percentage and fiber percentage out of your material. This is like just a simple first step that we need. But eventually we need people to run these tests on their products and set like, this is what you're getting in your batch, and there's quality control systems, and this established within our processors before we can have the same quality control systems that they're putting their stuff through in Europe. I mean, it's that simple. Is we need to up our game, and we can get there. But it is kind of really the responsibility of the industry, and like really is, those processors taking it upon themselves, especially initially, to say, you know what, I'm going to hit this quality control standard and this is where I'm going to be. And then convincing the market that that's important. And, like for instance, in certain things, it's obvious, like with bedding, if you make bad quality bedding that makes animals sick because of the dust content, you're going to have a backlash. You're going to have issues. And the same with builds is if it's not consistent enough material where the construction teams can operate without thinking, like they need to not think about that material at all. It's just another thing they use and they're just moving forward. If they can't get to that point, it's going to be really hard for adoption. Quality control on site is a nightmare.
Yeah. So I sat in on an interview the other day where some of the auto industry's material science professionals were talking about, or engineers were talking about, the key things that are keeping hemp out of mainstream production for them, and it's color or mold, things like that. In building, what are those main specs that maybe we're missing, or a lot of our processors really need to focus on honing in on so we can make it without being rejected? Because really a rejection is a huge black eye. These big companies are only going to try it one time and fail one time before they say we're out.
So as you were talking about with the color and those are specs that I think are falling in line with what they use for CANAF and other natural fibers. And again, tests that are out there, things that we just need to start implementing and actually doing our quality control up to. With building, we had an ASTM meeting about a year and a half ago or something. It was one of the early meetings in the development of actually the sieve analysis was one of the things that came out of it. And I think the determination was size, the size range, and making sure that it's the same, because that will affect your end properties. Dust content's murder. You have too high of dust content, it starts absorbing water, fighting with the binder. It can cause, especially if it's just a nightmare. You have to over-engineer to counteract the dust content. You have to add a lot more of things like the binder and things that you really is the more expensive part. And you don't want to be doing that. Dust clumps fiber clumps is what we call them. Basically, it's just, usually it's caused by long fibers that are still in the batch. They get attached to a piece of hurd and suddenly start bundling, or they start bundling themselves. If you get like a pocket like that in the middle of a mix, well, for one, it can get stretched out and actually crank around your machine and cause damage to whatever machines you're operating. But it also could leave a spot in the wall that basically is a different material than the rest of the material around it, and often a weak point. So that's a big one. We had some question about density, and we're still leaning towards density, but we need to have, all this stuff needs more robust research, and especially for certain things, there's just not a lot done. So density, theoretically speaking, the lower the density, the more air pockets it should have inside the hemp hurd, and thus it should be able to have a higher hygroscopic effect and more insulation value because of this air pockets, theoretically. But we don't have enough evidence to know if that's like a 0.1% difference or a 5% difference or what. So that's where it becomes difficult.
Okay.
Brittleness, that's a hard one. It definitely, if things are breaking apart while you're mixing them, it's not good. Creating more dust, that's horrible.
Right. The dust piece is something that, it's starting to come up more and more, but on so many pieces of processing, it's a problem. Some of the facilities I've seen, it scares me. It makes me nervous for the dust content. And the systems that are needed to control the dust are not cheap.
They're not, but you'll see any serious manufacturing plant has them.
Exactly.
And that's what it gets down to, is not only do you have quality concerns, but safety concerns.
Yes.
You have people breathing that stuff in, and also you have a giant explosive factor. There's this whole particle size to ignition ratio. Yes. It's like has to do with the particle size as well as the density of particles in the air and how flammable it is. It's the old grain silo explosions.
Yes. Well, it's a agriculture commodity, and this isn't just in hemp, right? It's across all commodities, and combustion is it worries me, and I'm so nervous for the black eye of what it will do to the industry if we don't get a handle on it within our processing. So what do you think we need, or where would you say reservations are for adoption from the construction and building industry?
Okay, price competitiveness is always an issue. That's like number one thing that comes up usually in discussions. I think examples are a big thing. There's a lot of talk about a lot of construction projects. I'm going to be telling you, there might be some news in the not too distant future of the HBI might be involved in some stuff. Getting examples out there, getting buildings that people can go in is a big deal. There's some hard to define positive qualities of these buildings that really the best way to experience is to actually be in one. So that's kind of a big deal. Especially with the codes, we're kind of there, but we still need to get them adopted. So we have going back to that whole story, you have all these jurisdictions, and now we have a model code that's accepted or will technically be released in the 2024 IRC code as an appendix.
Mm-hmm.
We need that to be adopted. The hope is because it's an appendix, it may be easier for people to adopt without adopting the whole 2024 code. Again, they kind of have the power in every jurisdiction to make their own decisions. But we're hoping for that because there's a lot of jurisdictions that are still using very old codes because they don't want to increase the requirements on their building professionals, which increase costs. And, a lot of them are energy standards and things that, they don't want to, I understand the defensiveness on their side because money is important. But it's just hard.
So something that comes up, and Cameron, I want to give you a shout out if you're still listening. I constantly hear your name and about the great work you're doing in the industry. So I just want to say thank you for all of your work, both for your, hempcrete and, distribution and materials and development, but also on the collaboration and amount of education you've provided other people within the industry. I hear thank yous all the time for the amount of work you've done and how much you've helped people. And so shout out, thank you very much for continuing to do that. And I don't know if you saw the comment that Cameron left, that we really need more processors in the creation of standards for hurd. And I couldn't agree more. So shout out, or, this is really a calling to get involved and have processors directly involved in those questions so that we understand those specs better. I'm happy to help facilitate some of that if we need to, or however I can. I have done a lot of work over this last couple months at putting together and understanding where processors are, what hurd's available on the market, how it's being shipped, what orders actually look like. And so however I can help share that information, I'm more than happy to. So Jacob, I have a question that's been really hard for me to answer, and it keeps coming up. came up just yesterday as I was talking to somebody who has developed material for the auto industry. What pain points are we solving in manufacturing or offsite building, as well as construction, for the actual manufacturer? I understand the value for the consumer, but what is that pain point hempcrete solves, or hemp insulation solves, for those manufacturers?
Okay, so maybe I'm not understanding when you say pain point, you do mean like the motivation?
Yeah. What is it? What is it that's going to convince the offsite builders to say hempcrete is the solution, right? If I look at like localizing supply, that to me seems like a problem they, as the manufacturer, are going to run up against. Or builders who now no longer have the supply of wood, right? Now they've got to look for alternative options. But in your perspective, what is that motivation at the manufacturing side?
I think there's a lot of long-term benefits and all that stuff that we go into. The short term, more and more industries and more companies are being put under pressure to have low carbon solutions to their products. This is a low carbon solution. If they need to hit numbers, if they need to figure out a way to make government officials happy or hit policies or anything like that, or they just want to be good players in their industries and are trying to find things that lower their carbon footprint, I mean, you have a giant potential here. So I think that's the easiest. There's a lot of benefits to that, of course, to the environment, meeting political things or legislation. Also, consumers are looking for that these days. If consumers know that you are offering a better solution that not only gives them what they need, but makes it so they're not damaging the planet, more and more consumers really care about that. So that's probably the biggest motivation for manufacturers to really look at this.
Do you think we're going to start seeing penalties and credits being given for those lower scores?
So, politics is complicated. I don't know. I'm gonna be very. I don't know what's right and wrong. Let's start there. I'm not going to say what's right and wrong. I'm just going to talk about what we see. So Europeans, you obviously see a giant push in this area. It makes a lot of sense that the industry works there and is developing very well in Europe, and will be able to meet these requests or fit into the systems that are being built to promote lowering their carbon footprint. If our government is going to try to hit the targets it's made, we probably need to start doing those things. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying if they're going to hit those things.
I see that. And the reason I bring it up is I see this as that solution on the manufacturing side, right? They're going to be receiving credits due to better solutions or penalties for continuing to manufacture in unhealthy ways, right? Or unsafe ways. And so,
And Neil's convincing us to all go to Canada because they're doing it better. But no, I'm just kidding. Not that they're doing it better, but
different, right? They're definitely, yes.
They're helping the industry. They're supporting their industry. It'd be really great if our country and everything would support our industry the same way that we see it happen in other countries. I think I didn't step on the landmine. So
no, I think you did great. And it's a tough question because I'm with you. I don't know what's right and what's wrong, right? But we see the benefits for the consumer and we see the need, but there's this hurdle to overcome on those that are actually manufacturing, that are going to be paying that extra price initially in order, before it goes to the development or the builders on the other side. And so,
I mean, you do normally pass that. You're going to be paying a premium on each level, I think. Hopefully they're not taking too hard of a hit, but you're right. I think the major push has to do with environmental impact.
Yeah.
Or quality. Like there is, especially with new developments and new products, they can come up with something that has different properties and can be useful in different ways. That's going to take some material science work, but
Where do you see the biggest opportunity for growth right now?
So
You just said what I
or do you mean like the building industry?
Building industry.
So it's an ecosystem. We have without the farmers, without the supply of inventory, you can't make the middle products or the services that go out to the end products to the consumers. So there's many different steps that all need to be worked on, and everything could be developing. And honestly, if any of them start developing, they can all benefit. I'm a firm believer that things come from the consumer side down, that if you don't have a place to sell it, then why are you making it? This is the area where I hope and I think we can grow and push for quickly. I think, the hope is, and like I was talking about people doing different construction projects around the country, I think that's what we need to be doing. And it's kind of weird to say this, but it's like we need to have opportunities for people to use the material and experience the material. I know there was discussions years ago about, and I'm sure they're still out there, and people really do need to keep having these, is whether we can get a whole bunch of universities involved and have them build small structures so their students can experience them. Like different architecture departments, can we help them to build like a little small unit that, their architecture students can come and feel natural materials, things like that. Like we need exposure to professionals, we need exposure to the general consumer, and building is like the actual end product, hempcrete, blocks, the panel systems. I think that's where I think it'll take off. I think that's where things will be big. But then again, if you don't have the processing, if you don't have the manufacturer, if you don't have the farmer, you can only go so fast. So it's gonna be kind of a give and take.
Yeah, well, and I think really that's just it, right? This buzz was really started about the value. It's undeniable, the value to hempcrete and what it does for the building industry. Now it's a matter of, can we meet the supply, right, of the demand, or, and what does that look like? It's such a balancing act. Even as industry, right? And we're out here promoting hempcrete, and it really is, well, are we ready to talk to this buyer yet? Well, not yet, because we're not ready to supply. And so what is that fine balance for you? And what are some of the challenges you're seeing now?
So I'm a big science person. Quality controls is kind of where my head's at. And that's why I think doing this groundwork, like the codes and the ASTM, is kind of priority number one right now. Because when we talk about these big, giant, legitimate industries, they're going to need that. No factory can shut. Like I worked in an automotive factory. If our line shut down, that was horrible. If we caused their line to shut down, we were getting fined by the minute. So, so it's a big deal to have safe, consistent quality. I don't know. I actually kind of lost the initial question. I'm just kind of curious about those challenges, right? Challenges to move into some of those big opportunities.
Yeah. And when we always talk about starting with the smaller builders, starting with, there are a lot of builders now that are building homes, and they're smaller organizations compared to a huge offsite, panel organization or company that's building homes. And really where I'm seeing a lot of interest are those big organizations, but not being able to get them the supply that they actually need to even toy with the idea of converting.
I see what you're saying. So you're talking about these big players basically need a supply chain that hasn't been created or established, because you're right. I mean, we need. There's no good business plan out there that doesn't have an idea of what the market is that currently exists to sell their product into. We don't have that history. We don't have that market. So how can we make these business plans to invest in these large manufacturing plants that then could supply this one potential project? Right. So there's a lot of risk in there. There's a lot of decision making at different levels, and often becomes too much risk for different players. And it's sadly something you need a lot of different players to line up.
Mhm.
You're right. Like starting small is kind of the way to move it forward. Like have it. Here's how I look at things in general: is build a system. You get a system that can work, that you can duplicate, and with very simple further instructions. Then run that system, make sure it works properly. And if somebody wants 100 of the systems, then you go, okay, this is the investment for 100 of these systems. And you start moving it forward like that. So yeah, focusing not necessarily on the big fish, but really dialing in your product at the low level is my manufacturing advice. And if these big fish really want to do this themselves, then they need to throw R&D money into detailing and getting the exact product they want, get a system to make it, and then they invest in rolling this out. Or they give the support or investment to the person they want to outsource it to.
I think you just hit the nail on the head when we talk about development of our industry, right? Is the pain point that these large manufacturing facilities are either going to feel or are starting to feel pressure because their consumers are demanding a more sustainable product or something that's carbon neutral, right? Once they really feel that, they have to then invest in new opportunity, and they've got to look at, what do they need to do to change or convert their line to something that is, including hemp, for example. And again, this goes back, hemp is a tool in an existing manufacturing or an existing industry. And we have an opportunity to better these processes or organizations or industries themselves with hemp, instead of hemp sitting as this lone soldier, right?
Yeah.
It's linking arms with these bigger verticals.
And trying to get these bigger verticals, trying to make it simple enough or adaptable enough where they can run runs of it, like do short runs and implement it already in existing lines. Like if we can do that, that's huge. If we could be, having concrete block manufacturer that makes concrete blocks shipped in and do hempcrete blocks, and then the next day be able to switch back to concrete blocks, that would be a way for them to enter into the hempcrete market, test out the product, get consumer demand up, do all these things the small business side really needs to do, like the slow part of it. And then once they build up the volume, they can shift over more and more manufacturing days to hempcrete. And that way they continue with their existing income stream and then are growing this new income stream that allows them to talk about carbon footprint and talk about their efforts there and really pitch those while still maintaining the work that they already had until there's a giant shift happens.
Without them taking so much risk on, right? We've got to be able to level or remediate, mitigate some of that risk.
Absolutely. I mean, so I have along with a master's, I have an MBA, worked in corporate world. It's all about risk management. You want to minimize that. You want to look at the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, the middle case scenario, figure out where that is. And really for me, it's always, let me look at the worst case scenario. If the worst case scenario isn't that bad, there's a good chance I'll go with it. But if the worst case scenario is bad, then I'm going to be very hesitant.
Well, and I think that's something too to take into consideration, right? We've got to be able to approach with the consideration of risk. What risk does this manufacturer or large organization have by attempting to use or by using or implementing hemp into their process? And yeah.
So I think, this is why I was very supportive and still am supportive with the
hemp builders.
No, the hemp builders, but the hemp initiative. Oh gosh, the one where that doesn't get tested for the fiber and grain.
The hemp exemption.
Hemp exemption, yes, the hemp exemption. That's why I'm a big supporter of that, because that is a risk. If you are growing material to then be used in the automotive industry that potentially could get burnt down because it went high on THC, that's a huge risk for these people in this up the supply chain. And when you talk about big gigantic industries, again, it's like if the worst case scenario is too ugly, then it's not likely going to go. And the worst case scenario is they have their entire supply chain disrupted. They can't make whatever they need to make to sell, and they go out of business.
I had somebody in the industry say, like, everybody else plug their ears, but if you have to deal with the farming side, it is a huge risk, right? So their recommendation was to enter the market and basically stay away from that piece, buy material that's already been processed, because the risk of supply is still pretty volatile. So I'll give another shout out. I'll share the link again. Go and support the hemp exemption. It really is about mitigating risk for farmers that increases supply for our processors, and it's just snowballs from there. And so thank you very much for bringing that up. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask Bo, definitely, because he's in Utah and that's where I'm from. And so I'm excited to see he's listening in, but spot on comments. Enjoying this from Utah. Seems as though builders are likely to choose the cheapest materials to ensure margins. Is hempcrete in a position to compete? And how long do you think it'll be before it is?
Okay, so this is the whole, I think, sales pitch on it. No, the short answer is no. Right now, we are more expensive. I think the numbers I hear is 20 to 30% more expensive, especially if you start talking about premium materials, because that's what it kind of is. It's not supposed to be your cheap bottom barrel. It's not supposed to be competing with the cheapest stuff on the market. It's high performance materials. I think where we will get the traction we need to convince consumers to purchase it and that it's a good economic decision is going to come down to decreases in electrical bills that are caused by using this material. And we start seeing the overtime impact on their finances due to that. So maybe it costs a little bit more to build, but every month, instead of paying this electrical bill, your mortgage is a little bit higher because the building construction was a little bit higher. So the consumer can make it make sense. And the truth is that the builder as a middleman has to sell that and, sell the product and get a higher price than they would for the cheapest materials on the market. Margins are complicated, but if you're defining what you're building with, then that margin should be built into the end cost.
There's a couple of things that just popped up in my mind, right? We've done this with solar and electric cars. Look, Elon Musk is selling an electric car that saves you on gas for more than what you would buy a gas vehicle for. And solar, we're investing thousands of dollars, tens and thousands of dollars, with the intent that over the long term, we're going to save. As consumers, our perspective of the value at the register has to change to what the impact is long term, right? If I buy a plastic bottle, I get it's 10 cents at the register, but what is the impact I'm making long term compared to the dollar bottle that may be biodegradable? And I think that piece we're starting to see, especially with younger generations, because they're being slapped in the face with, the plastics pollution, for example.
Absolutely. So there's both the actual dollar amount as well as your environmental impact.
That ultimately should be a dollar value, right? That's your score, your footprint of what you're leaving is. I'll be the first to admit I was so disconnected. I did not correlate my $5 t-shirt to the impact I was making on the environment at all until I got into hemp. And so it's been pretty a growth experience for me. Ernie has a question and then we'll wrap up. We're already at an hour and we could keep going, but would you approach businesses and government differently when approaching and educating them on the benefits of introducing hemp?
Okay, so business approach, again, environmental impact is probably the number one. Selling a higher quality version that could touch certain markets is another one, especially if environmental impact to hit like the youth market is involved. That's kind of like the business pitch. Governments, jobs. Like we're talking about as this thing develops, you have multi-layers of jobs that would be occurring, from the farming to the processing, to the manufacturing, to the end product manufacturer. So getting those end product manufacturers local means a big growth to jobs in the regions and the areas. So that's kind of a big push for the governments, as well as trying to hit their carbon footprints that they declared in these different meetings and conferences. So that would be kind of how I approach them, educating them. I mean, I think there's no silver bullet there. I think we're all trying, and we've all tried a number of different ways of educating people. Like events like this are great. Associations are great. We've tried, we've discussed earlier having events like in like business professional arenas. You don't want to sell them everything because it's too much. I went through this branding thing, especially since working on the Hemp Building Institute. As you can tell, it didn't really work because I have like way too many things I'm working on. But the idea was to keep it simple.
Yes.
And if you go on and on about the 7 or 8 or 20 different positives of hemp, their eyes are gonna glaze over. So just focus on things that matter most to them. Money is a big one for both businesses and government.
Yeah, what's in it for them?
Yeah, exactly. That's probably where our education really starts need to hitting is we need to get solid numbers on how it financially benefits companies and the government to do this. Which is not a small task.
Yes. Somebody else asked, and I don't know if you have this that we could potentially post, but ASTM testing development. Do we have a link for this?
Okay, so they're basically ASTM owns the test codes, and you have to pay for them and stuff like that. So it can't be publicly discussed. But if you're in these meetings, which I believe a lot of these committee meetings you can be involved in without even being a member.
It's like $75 to join.
And yeah,
so it's not, it is not a huge pain point in our pocketbook for the impact and the amount of knowledge. Not only knowledge, but the people that sit around those tables and have the discussions are a wealth of knowledge from different industries that have brought their resources to the table. So
that's probably but I think you can even be in those rooms and in those meetings without being a member. You just can't vote.
Gotcha.
So if you really are interested and are kind of on the fence about spending that 75, I would say look at things, kind of get involved. If you have to spend the 75, I might be wrong. That would be where it's
great. Yes, absolutely. Well, Jacob, I would love to continue to do this. I'd love to stay in touch and be able to collaborate and work together. How do people get in touch with you if they have questions or projects? I know that, and I'll put this out. I encourage people, especially on general questions, to really lean on the US Hemp Builders Association. That's what they're set up for. They're help to design, and really help guide. Jacob, I know you're working on specific projects. So I'm just putting that out there. If you have anything else you want to add, please let me know. But
I absolutely agree. I for the most part refer people over to the USHBA. But if you can find hempbuildinginstitute.org, the website. I'm just getting the branding stuff done right now. It has some generic stuff, but most of the content is real. It's just the images. So that should be updated like next week, I think. I think I'm getting the branding package by the end of the week, which I'm excited about. I think looks amazing, and I can't wait to show people.
That's exciting.
But Jacob at hempbuildinginstitute.org is my email address. I think you can find my phone number on the website. So if you want to reach out, you can. As far as what we're doing, again, really new. This, we kind of really launched in January. Still waiting for some final documentation from the government. It takes like 6 months to get some of this documentation back. So we're about 3 months into our 6-month time clock, but we're still waiting.
I understand.
So, we're still working out some details and figuring out how we're going to move all these things forward. But check us out. If you become like a subscriber on the website, as we start getting information to release, you will be connected. And of course, we will keep in contact with you.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. Well, you guys, thank you so much. There have been great comments that have come in today. There's quite a few of you still listening. LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. We stream live Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Next week, We've got a couple great interviews, but we also have an opportunity to log in and do a Q&A about the European market. So I encourage you to join. It is a Q&A session, which makes it nice, a little bit more networking. But again, if you guys have questions for both Jacob or I, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm excited about all the work you're doing, Jacob. I really, really appreciate it. And same thing, just like with Cameron, I hear a ton of compliments about the work that you've done. And yeah, I admire it and I respect it. So if there's anything I can do, you let me know for sure.
Yes. Two more things. I am on LinkedIn and Instagram, Jake Stash on Instagram.
That's awesome.
I'll probably get a Hemp Building Institute one soon, but
hey, one step at a time. It's okay. It's okay. Well, thank you very, very much, you guys. We'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week and weekend, Jacob, and reach out and we'll talk about events.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Talk soon.